Hello and welcome to the Sunday Superversive live stream. I'm Ben Wheeler and I'm with Alexander, or Alex, as you may know him. He's the owner of Cirsova Publishing and the editor of Cirsova Heroic Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. Bringing back the action and romance of science fiction past, he's dragging the short fiction market back to the 40s and beyond. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing all right, and sorry I did not hit pause before that went live.
Oh, I didn't hear anything. So.
Oh, okay. Well, good.
There's dogs barking because my neighbor can't control their dogs. How are you doing today, Alex?
I'm doing pretty all right. It's been a busy weekend, been reading submissions, was on the radio on Saturday. I'm here tonight, so it's been pretty good.
So so we're obviously here talking about the next volume, Volume 2, in fact, of Cirsova's mag's submissions. So tell us about it, starting with like the date and time when you can stop and what you're looking for.
Well, we started taking submissions on October 1st. We're going to be reading through October 31st. We are looking for heroic fantasy stuff along the lines of Howard, Brackett, Ray Gun romance along the lines of Raymond F. Jones, Ross Rocklin. We're looking for weird tales and occult mystery and strange body horror along the lines of Seabury Quinn or Bassett Morgan.
Excellent. So you mentioned ray gun romance, body horror. Like you could probably put them on a dice. You know those dice they sometimes sell at other shops or whatever. It's like, so what do we have? Ray gun romance. Darth Vader clone. You know, so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's an idea for a Kickstarter. Random pulp dice.
A great party game for writers who don't hate each other yet.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's see here. So you're 7 days into your campaign. I understand that you're on the 10th issue of the first volume, which will be its final issue. Is that right?
Yeah, that'll be coming out on December 1st-ish, maybe a little bit earlier.
Excellent. I know I supported the Kickstarter on that. That's a great Kickstarter. I've got all the nice little physical copies right there. My favorite Cirsova story, I've not caught up, sadly. My favorite story that you have, though, is the Skylar Hernstrom story, which I believe is called The Black Pyramid.
Oh yeah, that was a really good one. That one was a flash piece that he did back for issue 3.
That's right. And that was back when I was reviewing stories for Tangent Online. But I just fell in love with it. And I've got Skylar Hernstrom stories in the back of my mind, waiting for a rainy day where I will pluck them out and read them with every delight. I do have his, you advertise this quite a bit. What was it called? Song of Thune?
Thune's Vision.
Thune's Vision. Pardon me. Which I also greatly enjoyed of his. Do you have a personal favorite of the issues put out thus far?
Oh, that's really hard to say. I'm really partial to the Eldritch Earth issue that we did for issue 5. That was Misha Burnett's brainchild, and it goes back to our first issue, the story he did for us, A Hill of Stars, having sort of heroic fantasy adventures in a prehistoric Lovecraftian primal Earth setting.
I love it.
And so we got a circle of writers together, and they wrote stories in this shared universe, and we published several of them for our 5th issue.
Nice. I do like the idea of an Eldritch Earth, though quite frankly, I find the horror to be more real than than people would like to think of it. Fantasy wise, it's like, Lovecraft, that stuff doesn't really happen. No, of course. No, I don't mean the literal Cthulhu sleeping under the sea, of course, but I mean the sort of existential horror of an uncaring universe. Far too real for me.
Well, and one of the things that we were kind of sticklers on about Lovecraftian stuff is Cthulhu will get you thrown out, the Necronomicon will get you thrown out, Nyarlathotep will get you thrown out. Mentioning any of the Lovecraft heavies in your story will get you thrown out. But we managed to put out an entire volume of Lovecraft stories where nobody name dropped any of the Lovecraft heavies. There wasn't detectives going around chasing cultists. It was we managed to do stuff that was completely outside of the scope of the Derlethian mythos.
Excellent. Jeffro Johnson says they don't publish Derlethian horror, yo! Exclamation
True,
mark.
we don't.
Also, Misha Burnett says, "Hi, Alex. I'm in the chat right now." And
yeah.
Oh wait, yeah, you're in the chat too. My goodness, I'm bad at this. Maybe on purpose. Who knows? So you've had 2 successful Kickstarter campaigns to get it out. Are you planning another Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever it was? The second volume?
We've mostly done the Kickstarters just as a means to take subscriptions, because we go into each issue or set of issues being completely paid for and done, which is one of the reasons why we're able to fulfill 2 weeks after the money clears. If there were a better way to do it, we would, but there just hasn't been any effective subscription services that we've seen or found that we feel comfortable using. I'd like to be able to move away from doing crowdfunding altogether because it's kind of a pain, but
yeah, I can see that quite a bit. Well, is there no better way to do it, I guess?
We've looked at a few things. We just really hadn't found anything quite yet.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Motorcycles on the highway. Personally, I'm not. I understand Indiegogo, and I can see it as a marketing thing, but it's not really my bag of tricks. Though I should probably learn to get much better at marketing very soon.
Yeah, well, it's kind of unsustainable as a business model for some of the things that people are using it for. It basically feeds off the hype, because you turn selling a product into an event, but when you've been around doing it as long as we have, it gets kind of stressful to make it an event every single time. Really, you'd rather just have people, be able to say, all right, it's out, I'll buy it.
I dig it. Though I can see the benefit of it, because I know that, like I remember the Harry Potter lines and stuff like that. Not that I ever was a Potter fan. And it always strikes me as, while you do want it to be an event, you want people to celebrate it coming out, as if it's a good thing that it's coming out. I figure it's more of a fad than something that'll stick.
Yeah.
But if it is something that'll stick, I'll probably have to use it myself. And even though I don't have anything against anyone who ever uses a Kickstarter or anything like that, I don't want anyone to ever, I don't want anyone to ever take my words as drama or something like that. It's not something that I really appreciate or desire to rely on for myself.
And one of the issues with Kickstarter also is that every sale you make through Kickstarter is a sale that doesn't affect your Amazon numbers. So for us, our last drive, that's 200 plus sales of the magazine that Amazon doesn't know or care about in their rankings. And these
Which
days,
probably makes you the
self-pub and
most
indie
popular
thing is,
magazine. Just saying.
yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because there are some of the other semi-pro and pro magazines. A lot of them apparently rely really heavily on Patreon donations rather than sales. I think it was Clark from Clark's World who one time was like, if somebody can figure out how to make money selling a science fiction mag, let me know. In the meantime, support my Patreon.
Oh my goodness! I do like Patreon better than Indiegogo and Kickstarter, though, as a whole thing. But you do need name recognition to really take off on it. Though I do follow some people on it, like John C. Wright, and used to follow Digibro for a while. And it's the creation of content, special privileges to the author or the writer or the anime reviewer or whatever that really makes it sold. But honestly, some people aren't willing to do that or can't dedicate their time to spending, Discord or whatever.
Yeah.
Though, So we're looking for adventure. We're looking for ray punk romance. Clearly, we're looking for all the zany, awesome wackiness that used to happen back in the day when literature was not so, shall we say, converged. I think that's a polite way of saying it. So let's see here. What's your biggest inspirations for Cirsova? And I'm sure you grew up reading astounding stories, amazing tales, or whatever they were talked about. Do you have any hope to improve it in the future?
Well, I didn't actually grow up reading a lot of those things. A lot of those things I found in the last few years, partly because of Jeffro's Appendix N project.
That's a great project.
Yeah. So, I mean, before that, I'd read some. I'd of course read Tolkien. I'd read some Asimov. I'd never liked Asimov. I'd read a little bit of Andre Norton. Read a little bit of Anne McCaffrey. I'd read some of the branded D&D stuff. I'd read Le Guin. Back when I didn't know what good sci-fi was, I was a big fan of Le Guin.
Right. I think I've got one collection of her Earthsea stories. That's it. Honestly, I like Ursula Le Guin. If you don't mind following a rabbit trail for a second, always bothers me because even though Earthsea is okay, it's only ever been okay to me. I've got it and I bought it and it's better than some of the stuff I've read, but when you stack her against her peers, I don't really like it.
Well, for me, it was when I started reading Vance. I'm like, oh, this is what she was trying to do. At her best, Ursula K. Le Guin is sort of a poor man's Jack Vance.
See, I've read more Ursula K. Le Guin than I have Jack Vance, and I need to correct that. I actually have Tales from a Dying Earth somewhere in my library. Should read it.
Yeah, his Guy and Reach stories are what her Heinisch novels are trying to be.
Oh. So we talked about Appendix N. What else sort of grips you in that? Are there people we might not have heard of even through Appendix N?
Yeah. Well, one of the first parts of the question that you asked earlier was what sort of inspired me. A big aspect of it was Planet Stories magazine, which was really one of the last holdouts of the classic sci-fi style into the 40s and early 50s, when that stuff was sort of on its way out and being painted as unserious. But there are a lot of great authors in there, some of whom were at the time considered the greatest sci-fi authors of all time, like Ross Rocklin. Like he was one of the big three before Campbell's big three became the big three. In fact, he was, if I recall right, a keynote speaker at the very first ever Worldcon, because at the time he was considered the greatest writer of science fiction alive. But nobody's heard of him now.
Yeah, I admit I've not heard of him. What was his name?
Ross Rocklin.
Ross Rocklin. Oh, I'm getting strange pornography. What is his? How do you spell his last name?
Rocklin is Rocklynnne.
Ah, that's my problem. And you'd be surprised it does make a difference. That last name. The Rocklin is like, nope. I'll probably pick up something of his. I do like the amazing stories. My favorite, it also sounds very strange to you, my favorite amazing stories or astounding stories or whatever is, I've definitely mentioned this before, is, oh my goodness. You know what? Hold that thought and tell us something else that inspires you. I'll be right back, man. I literally have a physical copy of the magazine in my library. I'm going to go grab it, and then I'll talk about it. I'll be right back. Excuse me.
All right. Well, let's see. Some of the guys outside of Appendix N, one of the obvious names would be C.L. Moore. And I understand why C.L. Moore is not part of Appendix N, because as amazing as her stuff is, you don't really get gameable content out of it. It's not stuff that you could adapt with just a couple stat blocks, but it's just really, really amazing, visceral, dark science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And that's also one of the things that we're kind of looking for. Of course, it's something that it's hard to convey in submission guidelines, because it's difficult to quantify what makes stories like that the way they are.
So I did find my Galaxy science fiction tome, and it's Swinson, Dispatcher. And it's about a fellow who outwits various, from April 1956. It's about a fellow who outwits various corporate schmucks.
It's one of his later ones then, because he was really big back in the 40s.
Galaxy science fiction?
Oh, Ross Rocklin, if that's...
This is by R. DeWitt Miller.
Oh.
No, I was just saying that this is one. That was one of my favorite.
Okay.
Old-time science fiction magazine stories. Sorry, keep bringing it up. I should just keep it near me when I do these things.
Yeah, it's funny too, because for me, mid-50s is getting a bit outside my wheelhouse. Because, well, one of the things that I really started noticing, even with Planet stories, is by the 50s. Just by about 1950, there are subtle changes in some places and drastic in others, where you really see them getting away from the heroic adventure mold into darker stuff, into more big ideas, less action. You saw it a lot more prominently in magazines like Thrilling Wonder Stories, but even by the 50s, after some changes in editorship, you saw stuff that was trying to look at the big ideas and serious thinks of science fiction rather than the exciting, inspiring action and overcoming adversity. I
like how you said that. Though there's quite a bit of it in that Swinson Dispatcher, but it's mostly a comedy. He delays his enemies and preserves the company by having by adding to a senator's speech by revealing secret information of the senator's enemies to him while he's giving a speech on the moon, and the sun comes up and fries everyone by accident. It doesn't kill anyone, but it like fries everything because the senator was talking so long. So it's more of a making funny.
That's one thing that you see a lot of by the 50s is deconstruction of the 40s and 30s and 20s styles of science fiction.
Everything to it. I've always felt that everything to its time, but I always am sad to see that era so reviled. Though I'm sure it's crawling its way back out for revenge. And these are, of course, stories that you're looking for. You're for Cirsova Mag Volume 2. Are you going to do 10 issues like you did for Volume 1?
If we have the money, who knows, you know. We're looking at doing 2 issues next year because that's what we ended up getting the money for. I've got some secret project on the back burner that I'm hoping will make some extra money to keep the magazine itself afloat. Or, you know, we might not keep doing the magazine. We might do some other things if new and exciting things come along.
Absolutely. I always work on a few projects for myself. Though I do the Artist Classic and work on at a restaurant rather than, you know, honestly. Too bright there. But that's just me. So you're working on Cirsova Mag Volume 2. Let's see. Can you share anything about the submissions you've had thus far? Like what you're liking, what you're not liking?
Well,
without
can't really give any
information.
Yeah, well, I can't really give a whole lot away right now, but I can promise you that we will have Skylar Hernstrom novelette in one of the upcoming issues.
Yes.
So you guys are going to get some more Sky.
That's absolutely delightful, and I'm glad to hear it. You got illustrations for this one as well?
No, we're probably not doing illustrations. Illustrations are rather expensive if you're wanting to get good stuff that matches the stories and not just get public domain art.
I mean, why not Photoshop some public domain art? Give that smiling guy eating a salad a ray gun, and then ask for matching stories.
Yeah, that doesn't really jive with our aesthetic.
Oh, what a pity. Could even be badly photoshopped, so you could be ironic and appeal to the art house. Though I'm just
that Far West RPG that Daddy Warpig got his profile pic from.
I didn't realize. I thought that was honestly his picture.
Well, it probably is, but it was part of a Kickstarter for a now long defunct and failed RPG product, and I think one of the things it was going to have was weird photoshopped pictures of real people made to look wonky in the aesthetic that they were going for. It was really strange looking stuff.
Yeah. For me, there's always like, you can do the strange, the esoteric, the unusual, but it does have to be in some way recognizable. Recently, I started reviewing books on my Reading Rainbow Emperor YouTube channel, and for some reason, people don't like the lighting behind me. Where it's like the lighting is, well, actually, I record in this chair, so it's like, you know, so it's like this, except slightly different. So like you see my hand gestures and stuff like that, if I want to be seen, and people do not like it, and I am unsure why. I'm not exactly a perfect picture, and I do things mostly unclothed. So, you know, if the people want it, I'll give them the full headshot. You know, that's no problem. Because I bet it's that balance of giving the people what they want and maintaining artistic integrity for money.
All right.
For as far as that goes. People are talking about the Far West game, literary credulity of James Ward. Anyone can throw paint around and call it a witch's Sabbath. Pikmin. Yeah, it's true. Anyone can. Uh, Problem is, you're very good at answering my question and not very good about following rabbit holes. So let's see.
What rabbit holes do I need to follow? I can vamp if need be.
You can talk.
One thing Misha Burnett mentioned earlier was how the short fiction markets are a good place for experimentation to sort of find out what works, what doesn't. It lets you get some feedback while you get paid for your work as an author. So I think also a magazine can afford to take a chance on a couple weird stories here and there. And, you know, I've taken chances on a few things. Some things have worked, some things haven't. But, you know, there's enough there that you can get an idea of whether or not it's something that people like. And if people like it, you can get more of it. You can spin it off. You can do things with it, like with the Eldritch Earth thing. You know, that as far as I know, that was something Misha Burnett put together on a lark, and people really loved the idea of guys riding dinosaurs with spears and fighting Shoggoths. And people liked that enough that we found some folks and said, "Hey, let's run with this." And
isn't that in my creationist handbook? I'm pretty sure I saw something about that. But you know, and I'm a creationist, so it's like it's very funny to me to hear about that stuff. Keep going though. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, let me think. What else? Of course, we have some series that we've been running. I don't know how many people were fans of Adrian Cole's stuff from back in the 70s, but Adrian Cole was friends with Doc Morgan over at Castalia House. He sent him my way, and we got to talking. I happened to be reading his Dreamlords trilogy at the time, and he was like, "Is there anything you'd be interested in me submitting?" And so I was like, "Love some more Dreamlords stuff." And I was like, "Well, okay." So he dusted off his Dreamlords cycle, and we ran several new stories from that in Volume 1. From one of our other regular contributors, Jim Brayfogle, we've been running a series of kind of not quite Vancian, a little mix of Vance and Liber, Fafford, and Grey Mouser type stuff. The Mongoose and Meerkat stories, where you got the thief girl and her mercenary fighter friend, and they have weird adventures doing odd jobs, getting paid, just trying to make their way. And we might have some more of those in the upcoming year, because those were pretty popular.
Do you think, are you going for a theme for the next year, or are you?
Don't really know, because themes are always dependent on what sort of submissions you get. You can steer things a little bit in the directions you want, but it all comes down to what gets submitted, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Misha points out in the chat that we're going to have some more Darla of Deodant. That is Louise Sorensen's Eldritch Earth heroine. We had 2 stories last year with Darla. We might have some more in the upcoming year.
Looking forward to that then. Let's see. So with Skylar Hernstrom, he's still stands as my favorite, despite all the things that we've seen so far. Sorry, I'm gonna walk through passageway sort of thing. Was he like I can't remember. Besides Thune's Vision and the stuff he recently published through Amazon and other things, he was relatively unknown before he got published in Cirsova, wasn't he?
He had, I think, a story in Heroic Fantasy Quarterly, and he had done the flavor text in an RPG supplement whose name sadly escapes me at the moment. But unfortunately, I think those are the only 2 things that he'd really published before he started publishing stuff with us.
Are there
Those are the only ones that I know about.
Oh, that's all right. Are there any other new authors that you think really turned out great?
Oh, that's hard to say because we've worked with so many good authors over the last 3 years. I mean, Jay Barnson, he's fantastic. Brian K. Lowe, his stuff, he's been with us since the first issue. He's got several novels out, and I'm hoping that having published some short fiction with us has spread some awareness for his novels.
Absolutely. Let's see here. So I remember the John Carter series of poems. What inspired you to pick those up?
All right, this is a good chance to talk about some of the origins of Cirsova. James Hutchings is probably one of the main reasons why the magazine exists. This goes back to when I had a record label years and years and years ago. Through Project Wonderful, I ended up with an advertisement on my record label's website for a browser-based role-playing game called Age of Fables. And it was something that James Hutchings developed. And if you haven't played it, it's amazing. Go check it out. I'll dig up a link and tweet it out later. But anyway, I was just enamored with this game and found out that he also had a blog where he did a bunch of settings material for his fantasy setting. And a lot of it was tongue-in-cheek and pun-based, but it was really funny. And it's not often that I find that style of humor amusing, but I really enjoyed the stuff that he made. And so that website gave me the idea to brush off some of my own setting notes from a D&D setting that I had not had a chance to use. And that's where the Cirsova blog started, as a settings blog for that old D&D setting. After about a couple months, maybe 3 or 4 months, I was sort of burning out on the whole concept of the setting blog, but I'd been writing more and more about game design elements and just Dungeons and Dragons and gaming in general. And that's where Cirsova became a gaming blog, got involved in the RPG Blog Alliance, and that's where I found Jeffro and of course the Appendix N project that sort of led into everything in the early days of the Pulp Revolution and Sad Puppies.
I love it.
The rest is history.
Yep. I'm afraid I was part of the rabid puppy movement more than the sad puppies. But no, I don't mean it in a negative way. Here's
another aspect that might be interesting to the secret origins of Cirsova, as Misha puts it in the chat. When the Sad Puppies came out with their claims about what they wanted from science fiction, you had Brad Torgerson talking about the Nutty Nuggets, how science fiction had to have the Nutty Nuggets. You can't put a spaceship on the cover and then have it be a boring story where stuff doesn't happen. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And, with all the accusations that were leveled against these people, it's like, oh, they're all these sexist, racist, homophobes who want to drag science fiction kicking and screaming back to the 40s. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be great.
Right.
And then I checked it out, and it was like, really? Tuesdays with Malakesh the Destroyer? This is what you're going to bring us back to? And it was my disappointment with the Sad Puppies short fiction picks, which also led me into thinking, I'm sure there's better out there. I can find better. I can do better. Get some exciting stories where things happen and some guy punches an alien in the face and rescues some lady for the good of all mankind,
How do you know she's a lady? But beyond her plaintive wails and Princess Tiara and being chained like Andromeda to the rock, and I am in complete brotherhood with you there. I don't think many of our older I don't know how old you are, but older people running around the industry, I guess. Well, I grew up in it, and it was terrible. Most of the fiction and literature that was put up in my childhood was absolute garbage. I remember like picking through the library science fiction thing and going, yeah, "Oh, look at this." Gratuitous sexing between special agent, certainly not an author character, and whatever his fetish is. Bradford Walker says laser swords. We need more laser swords, and not in Star Wars. You're absolutely right, sir. Or I'd go through another one, and it's like boring, boring, boring philosophy, boring, boring. And I'd put that one back. Fantasy was like, oh, look at this, another Ranger chick on the cover. No, thank you.
Right.
It smells all the same and not as good as Redwall, which is my best. Discovered Misha Burnett says, I saw the call for Sword and Planet stories, and it got me thinking of the stuff I grew up reading. And sir, I think you are old enough to remember the good stuff, considering your amazing sideburns. At least in some of the pictures I've seen you in. I discovered Lovecraft and E.R. Burroughs at the same time, and I always linked them in my mind. And I believe that is not a false equivalency. So, like, growing up in the 90s, it was just terrible. Like, I buy the physical copies of your stories specifically and build up my library such as it is, though I'm certain it will burn down tragically and leave my kids orphans. But that's neither here nor there yet. Just so I can give my kids like decent, whenever I have them, decent literature where they don't have to go, yes, moral repugnancy, get rid of this. Yes, boredom, get rid of this. And which, I've seen my library shrink at science fiction section. Like a lot of the stuff out there isn't worth the time. Like, honestly, I understand Elizabeth Moon is a good person, or at least I've heard so. But I don't like her fiction, and I've bought her books on recommendations, and I just found them walking. Or with some of the stuff I see Tor put out, beyond like the politics of the. I realize I'm ranting. Outside the politics du jour, I don't find their stuff worthy of my time or money. The fact that they kicked out John C. Wright means I'll never buy another new Tor book again unless they find some champion. Bradford Walker says a lot of the big 5 SF set is expensive toilet paper. And that's very true. So I'm hoping that we're actually seeing sort of like a revival of like the heroic age. Like if the pulps were the golden age, that we would be curated version of Gimber. I'll talk about that in a second, Paul Lucas. If we could bring back sort of like the myth, like I don't know how best to describe it. Like, because we're dealing with non-reality and we literally create non-reality, it goes in certain cycles. Like the Greeks had like their myth age, their golden age, their silver age, their bronze age, or however it goes. That we're in the same thing and that we're on the cycle, on the upward trend, because we've realized how garbage the 90s were.
Yeah. It's funny that you mention Greek in the age of myth. One thing I kind of like to point out to people is that when we think of the ancient Greeks and Greek antiquity, they were as far removed from their classic and mythic period as we are from Robin Hood.
Yes, that is a true statement. They were picking up the pieces of the Bronze Age collapse, which is equivalent to worse than our Dark Ages, and sort of revitalizing everything. Who knows how? Like, we have ideas as to how far back Homer is, but that's still a lot of estimations. And the tale is older than that before. Dawning of the age of Iridium, Misha Burnett says. If I knew enough about Iridium, I'd find that poignant.
Well, and one of the things that we'd see a lot of from naysayers in the early days of the pulp revolution was people saying, "Oh, it never went away. It's always been going on," where they don't really maybe understand that there are generation gaps and there's a significant divide between the pulp revival that was going on during the late 70s that really fed strongly into Dungeons and Dragons, and today, where people who grew up today, a lot of what shaped fantasy was the brick fantasy, the branded fantasy, the stuff like Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms, and Wheel of Time. Mm-hmm. That's what a lot of people think of today. They weren't exposed to a lot of the stuff from the 70s pulp revival of that era.
And honestly, I've never really read much of that stuff, either because it just didn't show up in my libraries, or, it's one of those things like, I just didn't know the right people. Like, I could say fundamentally that my literature, like Horizon, would have been different if I had picked up John C. Wright's Golden Age books when they were published in the library, rather than that Bradford Walker mentions the 1980 cutoff date. And I know that there's some debate between like the 1980, 1981, 1983, or 1979, or whatever it is. We just know that it happens. By the way, the comment that I thought interesting from Paul Lucas, it would be nice to see an online library specifically for this sort of retro stuff, a curated version of Gutenberg. Actually, as the copyright border advances, I think that would become more and more of a necessity, so we do not forget our honored ancestors. Have a good night, Alicia. And Paul. In spirit, anyway. Let's see.
Well, one thing that people can do if they're following my Friday column at Castalia House is take the good stories that I've been reviewing and go onto archive.org and read the scans of the pulps.
Absolutely.
It's not been as easy the last couple months because I've been mostly reading and reviewing astounding science fiction, which is terrible, but
sorry.
I'm not gonna lie, like Big Brain Wojak was invented for that sort of stuff.
Right? Like Wojak, where he's like reclining on his own brain and the brain spread out to create like a female Wojak of his own brain. Like I've seen all kinds of crazy big brain Wojaks over the years. My favorite one is favorites all come from the Bitcoin bust. When it went up to over 20,000 and then crashed immediately, which were just hilarious. These people had no idea how to handle that sort of thing. I do have high hopes for the future, though, and for your magazine and others. Even though I am, like I've been doing anthologies with Superversive Press. I'm actually the editor of the Soul Anthology, which I'm looking forward to. I hope there's some like special snowflake. It's like, what about my story? Why is there so much red on my story? It's like my baby's bleeding out. It's like, well, we're professionals. Please be.
Oh, hey, I was wondering about those anthologies. Any news on Neptune?
So Neptune, I don't know. Our cover artist, we wanted a unified theme for all the covers, had some personal and work emergencies that just devoured his time. And so unfortunately Jupiter got delayed. Everything got delayed. Like I always joke that Soul will be out last. That's your date. And I've got actually a few good stories going on there. I've got a nice detective fiction about someone murdering the sun that I think will please the palates of our delighted readers. I believe the moon is being debated over, but there might be like a dark half and a light half of the moon, dark side, light side of the moon. All things like things are happening, but the problem is that due to the covers, due to the certain delays, it just keeps being pushed back uncontrollably. Technically, Soul should have been out by now, but the disasters happened. Neptune, however, I have just blanks in my head. I know who the Jupiter and Saturn editors are. I know who the Moon editor is. I actually don't know Pluto, Uranus, or Neptune. Sorry, man.
Well, I just wondering because I got a conditional accept and then got dead lettered.
I will. Planetary anthologies. Anthologies. It's one of those things. It's like, yeah, everyone's like, yeah, excited anthologies, and it's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm assuming this information isn't secret. Strangers always welcome. Abraham Strongjohn has a Neptune story. That's a nice name. I like that name. I might steal it. Where it's like someone was like, yeah, let's do a Zodiac afterwards, and everyone was like, no, like some sort of comedy skit. Though we are dedicated to finishing it. Don't you worry. It's just one of those things. It's like, wrestling with the abyss.
Anthologies, they can be tough. They can come together really easy, but apparently they can also be really tough. One anthology that I had kickstarted over a year ago is maybe just now finally going to be coming out. I don't know. Everybody thought that the project was dead, and people are like, is there any news on this? It's been a year. They say they're finally going to get PDFs to people. It's like, how hard was this to... I don't know.
And it's like, it's always like, there's this channel called Investigating YouTube, and it's like the background information for some famous YouTube stuff that imploded for various like internet history. Actually, internet history is becoming a genre in itself, but that's neither here nor there. But it's like, oh yeah, then this person like started sending death threats. And this person stabbed the other person or died in obscurity. And it's like, huh? It's like all of a sudden...
Like, what happened to Skelos? Everybody's wondering what happened to Skelos. Why didn't they get their issue 3s? Is there going to be an issue 4? I don't know, man. They got like $20,000 for 4 issues, and that lifetime subscription is looking like it was a pretty bad idea.
Oh, yeah. Though I don't know too much about Skelos. I do think I have like 1 or 2 of the single issues when I bought on sale. Maybe? I've heard of their name.
I thought they were going to be major competition, but they put out 1 issue every 11 months for 3 issues, and then nobody has heard from them, and half the people who back never got issue 3. So I guess I don't have to worry about them anymore. But I'm also kind of bummed because, I was actually a lifetime subscriber.
Ooh. You see, this is like it's like I'll back people. Like I backed Alt Hero, even though I didn't really enjoy it. I'm just not a comics guy,
Yeah.
Like it's like I could recognize this. It's like, oh, this is typical. This is good. But it's definitely not my flavor. I'm not even reading as much manga as I used to.
Yeah, I haven't been reading as much of that. I have been reading some more floppies and comics lately. A lot of Outsiders. That's kind of my jam, but
go for it.
I'm not really into a lot of what's going on with the comics Kickstarters these days because so much of it's like $25 for a trade paperback quote, and usually it's like under 50 pages. Like that's not that good a deal.
I'm a complete novice on this sort of thing. But I do wish him every success because it's like comics were a part of the pulp revolution. Like they weren't the same. I wouldn't call them the same sort of thing. But my dad has old comics from that era, and they're all crazy. Crazy. Fist fights. Batman has a gun and he kills people. Like this sort of thing. And I again, I would never.
Well,
do
and
it.
a lot of old
My flavor.
classic.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
It's all right. A lot of the classic pulp mags had their own lines of comics too, especially out of the Love Romances publishing. You had Planet Comics, Jungle Comics, and one of the things that I point out that shows that it wasn't kids reading the pulps, it was adults, is that you can hardly find any of those old Planet comics because, Mom pitched those out, but, actual Planet story, you get a bunch of them for $4 or $5 because there are plenty of them around. That's because Mom could throw out Junior's comics, but she wasn't touching Dad's stories.
Yep. And it's, yeah, I can believe that. I think with the whole change I'm starting to see there, not that I'm in any way some sort of expert or knowledgeable in all this stuff. I'm just connected to these people. I'm hoping that what the success they have with the comics trickles down to success with the books, the sort of like the literature part of it. Because it is an uphill battle, short fiction, long fiction, anthologies, magazines. Because it's like, guess what? I grew up with garbage. Most of the young Gen Z. It's like, we're gonna read To Kill a Mockingbird and 1984, and that's good science fiction. 1984 is political stuff. Like it's not in the same vein as My Chic of Mars or any of your magazines or John C. Wright or anything else. Like it's science fiction, sure, but it's a political message more than anything else. And it always kind of bothers me to rub shoulders with it, even though I do try to write high-minded fiction, because I know that excuse me, somebody is clearly in trouble or has been horrifically mangled. I'm certain.
Yeah. And Jeffro mentions Lee Brackett in the chat there is building directly on Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard's work. And you talk about political fiction. The last Brackett stuff I finished reading was her later Skaith books with Eric John Stark. And that one is literally, he shows up on a welfare planet and everyone is scared that if people can leave the planet on starships, the welfare state is going to collapse. And so he goes up, he kills the he's killing the bureaucrats who are in charge of the welfare system. He burns down the palace of the welfare lords, and everybody's like, oh, we got to get out of here. It's basically Atlas Shrugged with ray guns and swords,
Misha Burnett says, Misha Burnett says, I find myself in a lot of anthologies that I don't think should have been published because a lot of anthology editors can't get a book full of quality submissions. And I find that problem as well. Though I think the Planetary Anthology books have been some of the best anthologies I've ever read. Like I'm invested in Superversive Press. Like they're my boy, but not my child, but they're my homeboys. There we go. That's some hood lingo, baby. But it's like I picked up an anthology some years ago. I picked up a bunch of but they don't pay. Well, nobody's buying them. Sorry, man. I think Earth Anthology has like 60 sales. If somebody tells me that's good, I will do something in shame to alleviate.
Yeah, no, I'll admit that's not good numbers.
Yeah.
Which is, you got to kind of look at doing anthologies as a loss leader for a while until you pick up some recognition. I mean, Cirsova's been doing it for 3 years now, and we're finally to the point where we're breaking even on some things, but we said we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to pay semi-pro rates. We're going to keep doing it till we can't do it. And those first few issues, they put up okay numbers, I guess. I mean, we even got a Hugo nomination, but it's still
Back when that
relatively
meant
low
something,
numbers.
I want to say.
Yeah, no.
Kind of.
But one thing
Well,
that we have going for us is we have the residual sales. So people check out a new issue, they go back and buy the old ones. So
that's what I did.
We're to the point where we're getting about $150 a month in supplemental revenues just from sale of the back issues, which lets us be able to move into the future without having to starve ourselves and do without. So, but we're to the point where we're able to pay our artist a bit more than we'd paid in the past. We're paying our editors a bit more than in the past.
Your covers are amazing. Like,
oh, thank you.
Sorry for the interruption, but your covers are some of the best.
Well, thank
of
you.
Anthologies, magazines, whatever. Like, part of it is the fact that I hate living people on the cover, like taking a picture of somebody in a bodice, or After Punk's weird voodoo dude. It's like, you could have had a portrait, but it's like, you put the effort into your covers, they deserve all the praise they get.
Yeah, Jabari Weathers did some really good work for us in our first year. Koo and Ben both did good stuff filling in, and Anton Oxenuk he's our guy now. He's done 3 of the 4 covers for this year. He's going to be our primary artist going forward, and pretty happy with the work he's been doing for us.
Yeah, like if you don't mind, at the end of whenever we decide that we're done, I've got the Space Witch by Skylar Hermstrom on the physical copy in front of me, and with your permission, I'll read it out. But I was looking at the cover with the magician. If you don't want me to do it, you can tell me.
Oh yeah. That's from that was Jim Brayfogel's first story with us. He's the guy who's doing the Meerkat and Mongoose stories now.
Excellent. I've heard about those. I have, admittedly, sword and sorcery isn't my bag of tricks. I'm very much I've definitely fallen the Skylar Hermstrom side of sci-fi flavor, but I was more calling attention to the cover with the magician on the wooden planks of the ship burning everyone alive around him.
Yeah,
like that's a dynamic cover. That's some hotness right there. I can't believe I haven't mentioned this ahead of time. Though while I was thinking about it, there is a sort of anthology magazine thing called Red Rabbit Presents Science Fiction for the People. And it actually had a story from Nick Cole and the other authors, Rhodes Brazos, S.H. Mansouri, and A.K. Meek. Not that those names besides Nick Cole means anything to me. Perhaps.
Well, Mansouri, he wrote several stories for us.
Ooh, excellent.
He was in our 2nd, 4th, and 5th issues.
Oh, good. If he was in the 3rd one, then I didn't know who he was, because the 3rd one is my favorite. I would be quite ashamed of myself. But that is actually, if I could say anything, if they actually produce a number 2, they might actually have something to present in contest to you, though I don't know if they're an anthology or a magazine. It only has 4 stories in it, but they were all really top tier, excellent stories. Like, I thought I would like Nick Cole's the best because I like Nick Cole's work, but Pest Control by Rhodes Brazos was just astounding, as good as anything you produce. And Cirsova, which is, like, when I was reviewing for Tangent Online, I read a lot of short fiction, and you were always the tippy top tier compared to some of the other magazines.
Thanks. It is much appreciated. Some of the guys they're handing us over to at Tangent these days don't like us as much.
Oof. But it's, sadly. Not much for it. I remember having to work on it for like a week. It's like, okay, Ben, you put too much of your personal opinion into this. It's got to be more objective. And I'm like, but review art is subjective, man. And David Truesdale's like, no, my way. It's like, okay, sir. Yes, it's no problem. I like receiving, free stuff to review books. Uh, he's a pretty good guy. Let's see, the Red Rabbit anthologies.
Someone in chat wants you to ask about isekai.
Wait, what? Who said that? Who mentioned isekai? Ask about isekai. Frank Reasoning. Frank, you heard me. I hate isekai with a passion. Absolute passion. Like there's very few trends. Like I'm more okay with like the lolly dragon character being 1,000-year-old and thus legal than I am with isekai. Like it's such a cancer on everything. Like I've watched shows that are isekai because there's a 5-minute scene where the dude gets run over and then reincarnated into another world, and that counts as isekai. It doesn't count as isekai. They didn't need it in there. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but it showed his passion for Gundams. Who cares? He could have had his giant robots, magical powered robot things running around killing giant insects. Like, that's cool by itself. I would like dedicate my life to it if they were a thing. Like it's yeah, I could go on forever.
The funny thing about isekai though is, if everybody didn't just assume that it meant like a really, really narrow niche within the light novel market, it would actually be a useful descriptive term, because you have maker of universes. That's totally isekai. It's a story where a middle-aged struggling pulp author gets sucked into pulp world and he has crazy adventures where Tarzan is his spirit guide. That's totally isekai,
Yeah, it's like I actually parodied isekai. No, it's not just a smartphone show, Frank Reasoning. Smartphone show in another world with my smartphone. It's literally like smartphone isekai. That's the name of it. It's just bad. Like Sword Art Online is not the worst isekai, but it brought in all the worst tropes. It's like some sort of like, I don't know. I literally blank out bad things from my memory. So like I can't remember what the crappiest 1970s, 1980s junk was. But it's like Ursula K. Le Guin stuff and like all the negative stuff that you can pull from it getting enhanced. That's what it was. Anyway, I'm clearly annoying Jeffro Johnson. I'm sorry, man. I'm ranting. I just hate it so much. But there's good isekai. There's 12 Kingdoms. There's Escaflowne. There's
Escaflowne is straight up pulp. Like right? It's all those pulp, all those tropes are ones that you saw in pulp. There's a secret magic moon that you can't see because the regular moon is in front of it. It's good stuff. It's good enough that you wish that it was better.
Oh yeah, like it's like I wrote a parody of isekai where it's like I'm stuck in another world with a beautiful harem, but I'm gay, so it's a problem. So my life, I hate my life or something, and I wrote the most evil, disgusting, like decadent, debauched homosexual you could ever imagine, and then just like threw him in an isekai. And like the comedy is all like there's an assassin sent to kill him, and so he like rips off his robe. I see you come to kill my heart, but like I can't remember what I said, but it was like the trashiest romance you can imagine. And like the assassin freaks out and throws himself out a window. Like I just made fun of every trope. He gets a harem. He has to do various adventure things. There's like terrible magic. The first thing he does is get excuse me, he gets gunpowder, and then he uses it to shoot all his problems. Like I just tore down every isekai thing I could get my hands on. Like there's this maiden who's so pure and womanly that he just causes him physical pain, like in some sort of radiation. Like anything I could do, I did it. but I need to stop ranting. I feel emotional about these things because I care about literature. I care about reading and writing good stuff. Like it's like Anton Ego from Ratatouille. You know, if it's not good, I don't read it, and then just walk off. And it's like I have to be careful because I get very very strong emotions about some of the stuff I read, and like
Yeah.
some people are my friends, some people are people I want to promote rather than detract from. Like with my review show, Reading Rainbow Emperor, I do criticize the books within it. I always have, but when I wrote physical reviews irregularly, but I also try to say what's wrong about it, what's better. Um,
Here's a hot take. The memoirs of William Bradford, governor of Plymouth Colony, was isekai. Hey, they literally called it the New World.
Oh, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's like, oh my goodness, so that means that Pocahontas is isekai.
Absolutely.
I love it. I hate it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Um,
Change my mind.
I can't do it. Hansel and Gretel is isekai, but yeah, but oh my goodness. But like with the stuff coming out, like it's like I've tried to promote everything good. I try to criticize it, and I try to see what like try to see what the good in it. How can you improve it? Like with a lot of people, I don't see that same sort of motivation to improve. Like they want to revive the old styles, which, by the way, I love to do myself, especially with the pulp rev. But a lot of them, like the craft they put into it, I don't see it.
There's sometimes a disconnect between the desire to create something and the ability to create something that matches what you're going for. And it's not something that's easy to address because so many of those qualities are kind of ephemeral. All you can really do is say, go back, reread, look at what you're trying to go for, do it again, you know? And
you're absolutely right.
One of the drawbacks of where we are at in publishing with all the indies, print on demand, self-publishing authors, indie authors, is that there's the ability to get the stuff out there without having to go through some of the steps that are necessary to create a good product, which are, of course, finding editors, proofreaders, beta readers, artists, layout people. And there are stories where it's just like, you know, there's potential here, but you really needed to take that extra step, get some people in on it to work with you on it. But because that's an investment, people don't necessarily want to spend the time or money because they're like, well, it's not going to make a return to pay for it anyway. One of the advantages I have of doing things as a magazine is I'm able to work with authors, act as an extra layer, and then provide them a layer of proofreading and editing from our copy editors. We're able to put it in a format that looks good. And so, to an extent, that's kind of a value add.
Yeah.
One of the things that we try to recommend to people if we get something that we kind of like, but it just needs some extra work, is we try to point out things that would be helpful, directions that they could go with it, what they need to do, what they need to look at, because there are things that we see all the time. A tendency for too many clauses, not using colons or semicolons right. a lot of people do the really short, choppy sentence fragment thing to try to establish a certain pacing that they think it works, but it really doesn't work.
That's true.
That's something that we see a lot.
I know I have a problem with my sentence structure. I like to say I like my sentence structure like I like my women, long-legged and Byzantine. And I need to improve on that, honestly. But I also try to I'm also writing a gothic cyberpunk novel, so and gothic in the way to in the language, not so much.
Yeah,
the thing, and I use cyberpunk just because it's space horror, but it's also got cyberpunk themes.
Yeah, but just one of the things that I see as being a risk to the pulp revolution movement and just indie science fiction in general is the tendency that people have to only give things one chance. So if they see a bunch of books coming out from a group that just really need some proofing, really needs more editorial passes and work, then they'll be like, oh, this is all just bluster and everybody's wasting their time. There's not the substance there that needs to be there. And then they'll write the whole thing off. And you don't want people writing whole things off.
You're absolutely right. Like for myself, with the military sci-fi going on, not that military sci-fi ever leaves, I have a hard time with it because I read a lot of, I've read a lot of military sci-fi stuff that just feels the same. Like there's Soldier 1, there's Soldier 2, there's Comic Relief Soldier, there's 2 weeks from retirement sergeant, so on and so forth. And it's like even though I will read military sci-fi, I desire that higher level. Like Galaxy's Edge is one of the few.
Captain somebody, Lieutenant such and such, and Ensign so and so.
Right.
You see that a lot in Milsif.
And like the only ones I can read are like the very best, like Richard Fox's Terran Armor Corps, or I haven't even read his main Ember War series. And he's not really mil sci-fi, but he's kind of adjacent to it, I think. Even though I'm certain that he markets it to them. I've only read like one thing by Tom Kratman that I've really liked, and that was Caliphate. My goodness, these people are active today. What was the other thing I read? Galaxy's Edge, Richard Fox, Tom Kratman's Caliphate, Riding the Red Horse. There's the other one. But that isn't modern.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Milsif is a little bit outside my wheelhouse, which is strange because I'm a huge fan of Gundam, and that's about as Milsif as it gets in the anime side of things, but it just doesn't really do much for me in written prose, which I guess people should know if they're considering submitting to us. We're just not big into Milsif.
Oh my. And actually, like, I'm currently revamping, just so you know, for my short, like, because I use my real name on this, a short story that involves knights on motorcycles jousting, and someone cloning the best knights in the world to, take over the world, I guess. I don't know. Like, I like that stuff way more, but the thing is, that stuff executed properly is very rare.
Yeah.
And like even like myself, I wrote it originally for what's the name of that? Tales of the Once and Future King, which was a King Arthur sci-fi fantasy anthology, which was very good.
Yeah, funny thing about that actually spun out of a story that I talked with Anthony about. We ended up not going with it in Cirsova, which turned out to be a great thing because he turned it into a really cool anthology.
Mm-hmm. And it was, and like I've talked to him about like where I feel like the narrative missteps were and all that jazz, but it was really good. And honestly, I hope to see something like that again. But again, we'll hitting that anthology wall, where it's not, if we hadn't dedicated ourselves to it, it really wouldn't be worth it. Hopefully it changes up sometime, but it's one of those things that I kind of struggle with. Like, I'm a guy who has much more of a palate for books than I do for the food I eat. Now, I'm a good cook, but it's very annoying to try and find authors I can follow. Like, I follow Nick Cole, kind of. I follow Jason Ansbach, kind of, but I really haven't read any of his stuff beyond Galaxy's Edge. There's a mangaka called Tsutomu Nihei, and his original work, Lame, exclamation point, by the end of it, is a masterwork of tone, of atmosphere, of science fiction vistas. The dude walks through a room the size of Jupiter, and he gives it that weight. And then he has to fight his way up a giant elevator. That's like basically what the equator, not the equator, the pole to pole. Like it's all kind of crazy. But like his subsequent work isn't that good. It's still got the great art. It's still got the sci-fi feel, and his action scenes are top tier, par excellence. But he just doesn't have what he had in his first real thing when he didn't do it for the fans or for like the money. He did it for the art's sake. And I'm hoping that we can like get to a point where we can be like that again. And not like art like, oh, I am sitting in a Parisian cafe where Hemingway blew his brains out, and sort of that art, or the art of the postmodernists, which isn't art at all but anti-art. I want to see that stuff again because I can read it, I can love it. I don't have to worry about whether or not there's Soldier 1, Soldier 2, and comic relief Polish name sergeant. And I'm not wrong about that.
Sergeant Sarchkowski.
Exactly. But it's like I want to see that again. Like sort of like I'm current like, but the thing is we got bills to pay and mouths to feed, and there ain't nothing in this world for free. Like The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite works of all time. It's got this great pacing. Every chapter is a cliffhanger, but it was written for the magazines to support, I assume, Alexander Dumas's many appetites, and I'm fine with that. But I would like to see. I want to see something higher, more pleasing to my appetites, which is why I love your Mac. And I am infinitely glad and grateful to you for coming on with me for the show.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I do plan on reading out The Witch, Space Witch, by Skylar Herdstrom with your blessing.
Yeah, go for it.
Anything else to say before I launch into my terrible rendition?
You can find us on Amazon if you're looking for back issues. If you want to know more about the magazine, our website is Cirsova@wordpress.com. Our submissions are open October 1 through October 31st. We are paying 1.25 cents per word for fiction that we buy, and we are looking to acquire about 100,000 words of fiction for next year. So competition is going to be fierce. We've already got a slush pile of about 60 stories and 1 million words.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
good luck. Send us your stuff.
Oh, and you'll definitely hear from me as well as I eventually hit that one sweet spot, because my dream is to write Arthurian myth, except everyone's in way cool space armor and riding motorcycles and jousting at light speed.
I don't know if you've read issue 4 yet, but we did have a really cool spin on Arthurian myth where we had a young King Arthur fight a Shoggoth in the lake.
Oh, yes.
And the lady in the lake was a deep one.
Yeah. Like, the thing is, it's been 2 years since I've read it.
Yeah.
Solidly, because I did it for Tangent way back when. And has it been 2 years since I was reviewing for Tangent? But you know, I'm reaching that point. I'm 29 now, and it's like, oh my, time,
Oh man, how old
mortality,
are you? I feel old now.
right? And it's like I catch a corner of my and there's death like holding up a spinning clock. It's like okay, I'll get back to work. Um, that's more like my morbid humor. I actually have death show up in the novel I'm writing, where it's a post future where people don't die, not often, and if their bodies are destroyed, they get sucked up into cyber heaven, run by of course the Catholics. Um, and so some people actually die and they don't go to cyber heaven. And he's like, you've brought me customers. First time in a million years. And, you know, like the dude freaks out because it's literally death, you know, with his skull face and scythe and everything. You know, just standing at him, congratulating him on killing somebody after so long, you know, which is, I think, the ultimate end of all men. But that's okay. The death thing. That should motivate us to write more, pursue better, and fly higher, I think, even though we could die anyway. Man, I'm getting morbid. I think I'm getting into the mood for the story. That's what I'm doing. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. I will
yeah,
probably,
it's been a lot of fun.
if you plan on doing a Kickstarter or when you release it, definitely send a message my way, and I'll have you on to fluff up, though I am no fluffer, your next work, whatever
All right.
side that comes in. I'm always eager for that sort of thing. I need to have John De La Roz in here, but he always goes to like baseball games on Sunday when he's supposed to be here talking about his work.
Streams at lunch, man. Who has time to stream at lunch?
I know, right? And he does it like all the time. And it's great. Like I can't imagine, though he doesn't eat or something like that. I don't know. No, I've seen his lunches. It's like juiced kale. I don't know. I don't know how he could write such a great steampunk. Apparently great steampunk when it's like he's drinking things that man should not be drinking. Actually, Superversive Press does publish his work, but it's like it just crushes the steampunk new releases. So I don't know how starved those guys are in the steampunk world for halfway decent fiction or good fiction or great fiction, but apparently they are just super starved for it. But the reason why I'm thinking about this is that I am working on a steampunk serial. I don't know if you follow John C. Wright's blog, but Preston Lost, that series, Lost in the Last Continent. Have you read that yet?
No, I hadn't.
Oh, it's a great serial. But anyway, I am letting myself be distracted from Skylar Hernstrom's The Space Witch, which is a deep, deep sin, I'm sure.
All right. Take it away, Ben.
Yep, you can stay or you can go, but I'm going to read this out. With a heavy heart, Ataus surveyed the battlefield. His comrades lay dead alongside their foes, the terrible revenants, those raised by the Space Witch to fight under her black banner. Only Ataus remained. His crystal armor, proof against spell or beam, was chipped in 20 places, though a dozen minor wounds his blood seeped. Through a dozen minor wounds, his blood seeped dark red against the splatters of his foes' black ichor. His brothers looked peaceful now, as when in repose around the barracks' pleasant gardens, reciting verse for each other's amusement. At his back was the black pyramid. The twin star suns were sinking behind it. The pyramid shadow crept across the ground, a blanket of night to cover those resting in eternal slumber. The feeling of being watched pulled him from his black reverie. There, across the field, the Space Witch stood in her chariot, glaring. With a snap of the reins, the steeds pulled, spitting purple flame from their haunches. Atals sheathed his sword at her approach and slung his beam spitter across his broad back. She was naked but for a fluttering black cloak, her blue-white skin brilliant against its oily darkness. Her black high boots trod the bloody ground as she alit. The warrior steeled himself against the charm of her voice as she spoke. Atals, is it not? I watched you rally your men along the North Ridge. It was a stirring sight, you at the fore, cutting a swath through my ranks. But in the end, the numbers told. But I still stand, and all your husks lay broken. She smiled with full lips, painted deep indigo, parting just enough to expose the sharp points of her teeth. You are all that remains. The spells marked to destroy me have gone with your sorcerer into the void, and chivalry prevents you from striking me. I have won. Though I may not strike you, I will not give way. Atalsa's back stiffened as he pushed his helmet up to expose his face in the manner of the old hoplites. He met the witch's gaze, his deep-set blue eyes fixed on hers, her swirling orbs of deep green. Her black hair was loose under her elaborate cowl, stirring slightly in the breeze as seaweed might underneath gentle waves. She laughed icy chimes, which, carried by the dusty wind, echoed like music in the valleys. We are at an impasse. I am in no danger from your blade, and you are safe from my spells while your armor remains intact, and I imagine you are unwilling to break your oaths. Atalsa's expression was grim. You are correct, and I am unwilling to break mine. The witch placed her hands on her hips, shaking her head as she thought. The warrior scoffed. What oaths does the space witch swear? She wore an irritated expression as she replied, Foolish man, night whispers in my ear this very moment. I bear fealty to things which you cannot imagine. All throughout the universe are shadow and fog. Their caress envelops me. Their love is a tonic against mortality. Their power is my well to draw from as I please. Atalsa's face adopted a quizzical look. Is your form a bewitchment? Are you in fact female? One of your stature would seem to be beyond such considerations. Have you ever had a nightmare, warrior? Yes, of course. Then you have known children born from my womb. The space witch drummed her fingers against her smooth thigh, while her other hand massaged her pointed chin. Her eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. It shall be a test of willpower. She strutted forward confidently and continued. If your cause is so just, your heart so pure, then it should be nothing for you to withstand my kiss, noble warrior. If you should, I will consign myself to the void for 1,000 times 1,000 years. The warrior spared a glance behind him. There the pyramid sat, bathed in orange and purple as the suns descended. Within its labyrinthine chambers lay the secret that would enable the witch to undo the balance that had governed the universe for the last 100 billion years. He felt weak with exhaustion and fear. It was not supposed to be like this. His brothers and the sorcerer were to have conquered this menace together. But he was alone. There was nothing to do but accept her challenge. Atals nodded. The witch smiled, full mouth twisted in wicked glee. She pushed his helmet back further until it fell to the ground. Her long nails teased the dark curls, still matted with sweat from the battle, which fell to his shoulders. He bent forward, and their lips found each other. He was a man like any other, and had known love and lust. But now he understood the lure of the dark. He felt the desperate hunger of wolves hunting under moonlight. He felt the comfort of the envelopment, submission to a formless totality. The weight of eternity was forged to the desperate desire common to all life, now a hammer to beat upon his soul for all time. He felt his soul slip to a place beyond recall. But as he fell away, for the briefest of moments, the pyramid appeared before his mind's eye. An eternity later, the kiss came to an end. The space witch stepped back as her eyes slowly opened. Her face showed unexpected displeasure. The warrior had not stepped forward to follow her. Impossible! You have defeated me! With an angry flourish of her cloak, she turned and mounted her chariot, pointing the steeds to where no light had ever reached. In a moment, she was gone from view. No, I haven't, Ataus whispered to no one. He lay on the battlefield and let the lingering weight of the kiss carry him to where he could rejoin his fallen brothers. That is my favorite Cirsova story. And while my memory does get faulty sometimes, it is not because Cirsova did not try his hardest to scar my memory with great stories I have not read, so that I may feast beyond anything I've eaten so far. Honestly, I wish Cirsova Alex every blessing, and will, when it comes to mind, pray for his endeavors, as is my duty as a Christian. God bless to everyone who's been listening in, and I hope you follow Cirsova and read his blog and buy his books. They're worth every penny. Certainly Cirsova Mag #3. Of all of them, it is certainly the one that has stuck with me the longest, if only for that story. Have a great evening.